Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever will be the time you're watching for this conference video. I am really pleased to be here with you in this fifth International Congress of Neuroscience in Education by Faculty of Education at UNEMI University. We welcome all of you to my presentation, which is titled Neuropsychological Barriers to Oral English Production in EFL Context. I am really delighted to share some insights from a recent analytical study that explore how the mind, emotion, and also culture converge to influence how learners speak, or sometimes why they remain on silent. Before to start with my presentation today, let me introduce a little bit about me. My name is Paula Dominique Fabre Triana. I am master in teaching English as a foreign language, and also I got a bachelor degree on language pedagogy on English. Both of them in this awesome university, which is Universidad Estatal de Milagro. Also, currently, I have the privilege to work as teacher in the major of pedagogy of the national and foreign language online here at UNEMI, and an English teacher also in a high school in Durán City. In addition, as part of my professional experience, I used to work in Guayaquil University as teacher in the admission program. So let's start with the presentation today, and I'm going to introduce the general objective for you. This one, as you could see here in the slide, is to examine the neuropsychological factors that hinder oral English production in EFL context by integrating insights from neuroscience, psycholinguistic, and classroom-based research, with the goal of identifying effective strategies to overcome these barriers and enhance learning's oral proficiency. Also, let me present for you these three specific objectives of my research. First, to analyze cognitive affective barriers such as working memory, overload, and foreign language anxiety that interferes with oral production. Second one, to identify sociocultural and environmental barriers, including classroom practices and cultural norms that limit speaking opportunities in the classroom. Third one, to propose pedagogical and psychological interventions that reduce anxiety and promote communicative confidence in EFL learners. As a brief introduction of this study, remember that when we start to learn English, it is taken, right? This speaking skill remains one of the harder skill for EFL learners. Even after many years of study, we still maybe trouble or struggling with the production, with the oral production. Actually, speaking in a second language requires real-time conceptualization, formulation, and also articulation at the same time, all of them. So these processes that depend on both cognitive efficiency and also emotional regulation. Neuropsychological barriers such as anxiety, low working memory capacity, and cultural reticence often prevent learners from expressing themselves fluently, creating a gap between language knowledge and performance. So multiple factors can contribute to this gap in oral proficiency. As you already know, because I already told this, neuropsychological barriers, a combination of cognitive processes, constrained and affective, talking about emotional feelings factors, can significantly hinder speech production in a second language. At the same time, sociocultural barriers related to the learning environment and cultural context often exacerbate these difficulties. So what this means that make a little bit bigger the problem. For example, in many traditional EFL classrooms, teachers, we emphasize on grammatical accuracy instead of trying to do the student make speaking freely, right? Likewise, cultural norms in some contexts discourage learning from speaking up or taking the risk in a new language, further limiting their practice and confidence. This perspective article actually explore how cognitive affective barriers such as a limited working memory capacity, speech planning challenges, and language anxiety, and social barriers such as classroom practices and cultural attitudes could jointly affect in order to blockade the English oral production. For the justification part, I have divided into four stages the why of this study. First, we have here the recognizing oral deficit, which is a problem in the classroom. This persistent gap between linguistic knowledge and spontaneous speech ability reveals that speaking is not only a linguistic task, but also it's a complex cognitive and emotional process. That means that it not only depends on linguistic processes, also it depends on the way the words, so the combination of both languages are provoked in the brain internally speaking, and also the emotions that are reflecting as a human normal setting when we produce a language in a new language. Also, the second state is cognitive affective dimension. So, according to some studies here, the cognitive load and anxiety are invisible, but both of them are powerful. Neuroscientific evidence show that anxiety actually triggers the amygdala and reduce prefrontal control. So that means that it's a fact, internal fact, that blockade literally the fluent speech in students. The third one is the sociocultural constraints. These cultural expectations and teacher-centered practices often reinforce silence, student first losing face or making mistakes. That's why addressing this issue can lead to more confident, fluent, and autonomous speakers, transforming EFL instruction from only base form to communicative learning centered practice in the classroom. Then we have pedagogical transformation as the fourth phase here, or for a call in another way, the transformative need in the classroom. To change this, basically, we must as teacher design pedagogically safe classroom because we are the ones on chair of that. Use communicative activities and train teachers to understand this internal process. Remember, it's not only about linguistic interaction, it's also about environment, it's also about activities, it's also about the internal process that happens when a student is trying to produce the language in an oral way. So for that, I have included two kind of methodology here, or I have divided the methodology, into two parts. First, the analytical design, which is a quality descriptive and analytical approach, which was used to explore how cognitive, affective, and sociocultural factors heighten oral English production. This study actually synthesized findings from neuroscience, psycholinguistics, and classroom research to explain how these barriers interact and affect fluency in the students. For the thematic focus, I have pointed out two important items here, which is cognitive affective barriers, working memory overload, anxiety, and neuroinhibition, and sociocultural barriers, accuracy-focused teaching, cultural silence limited by speaking exposure. After that, we have development, so you know about this study, about this research. So first, we have cognitive and affective barriers. In many EFL contexts, learners have few authentic opportunity to use English beyond the classroom, limited practice and motivation. For cultural and environmental barriers, so we have the anxiety, which is hid by judgmental environments, and the lack of practice, which prevents automaticity, increasing cognitive effort. Also, over time, this creates a cycle of silence where fear and limited influence feed one and another one. So for cognitive and affective barrier to speaking, remember that producing a speech in a second language is a mentally demanding process that requires the coordination of thoughts, language formulation, and articulation in real time. According to some researches that I did, according to Levels in 1989 psycholinguistic model, these processes are mostly automatic in one native language but remain effortful for second language learning, who must consciously search from vocabulary and construct grammatical sentences. This process deliberate effort places a heavy burden on working memory and attention, explaining why learners often speak slowly and pause frequently. Empirical studies also confirm that working memory capacity is closely linked to oral proficiency, meaning that limited cognitive resources directly affect speech fluency. When learners face linguistic complicity, their attention is split between form and meaning, resulting in hesitation and reduced speech output. When we talk about sociocultural and environmental barriers. So we could say that beyond mental processes, the sociocultural environment strongly determines how, when, and if the learner speak English. In many EFL classrooms, traditional teaching emphasized grammatical accuracy, reading and writing drills, leaving little space for spontaneous oral interaction. And that's a problem. Such as accuracy-driven approaches creating fear of making mistakes as teachers often interrupt or correct students publicly. Consequently, learners avoid speaking unless sure of being correct, developing a fear of negative evaluation, of negative feedback, because we as teachers did maybe a bad move, given a mistake feedback that suppress participation. That's why class activity tend to be script or mechanical rather than communicative, limiting creativity and fluency. This pedagogical culture produces students who can write and understand English but remain reluctant to speak in authentic situations. Also, we have here the results. And for these results, I have 5 recommendations. First, foster a low anxiety, supportive classroom climate. In this first, teachers can reduce fear of speaking by using positive, no threatening errors correction. So, for example, when you are giving classes or when you are like training in class, so handle speaking production, please give gentle feedback after a student finishes speaking rather than interrupting him or her at the middle of the sentence. And by explicitly reassuring students that mistakes are natural part of learning, because that's the correct process. So we did mistake, and that's the way through experience we learned from that situation. So that's why when learners feel psychologically safe, language anxiety minimized, and their willingness to speak increased, according to what said John in 1991. In practice, strategies include using icebreaker, pairs group, which it's less intimidated for students than speaking in front of the whole class using maybe presentations. The second one is the integration of communication focus activity. So here to counteract bias toward passive or form focused learning, teachers should incorporate regular speaking tasks that prioritize meaning and interaction. This kind of technique from communicative language teaching and test-based learning, such as role plays, group discussion, problem-solving tasks, in which you not only use the cognitive skill of the student, but also the attitudinal ones. For provide cognitive scaffolding, we have that it is one important approach is to teach communication strategies that help learners navigate difficulty moments. For innate sociocultural relevance and support, we have that teachers can acknowledge and discuss local attitude and culturals toward speaking, helping students reframe mistakes as opportunity for growth rather than only a source of shame. So The last here, we have invest in teacher training and awareness. Finally, institutions should support teachers' development in terms of a psychological and cultural aspect of language teachings. In conclusion, we have here that overcoming neuropsychological barriers requires holistic reform, reducing anxiety, easing cognitive load, and facing sociocultural norms. Teacher plays a key role in creating supportive and communicative and low-stress environments and normalize mistake and value student voices. I'm gonna leave you with this phrase. Enhancing oral proficiency means raising how we teach, how we understand the learner's mind, and how we build classrooms that let voice emerge. Thank you for came until this point. It was a really pleasure for me. I'm grateful for your time and I expect you have enjoyed, learned from my study presentation for going to start innovating in your classroom. Have a great day.